Got another show and tell this morning. I wonder how many, probably kids, I wonder how many of y'all I could convince that this is a new technology. You know, raise your hand if you know what this is and have used one. All right. You know, it's kind of like a tape. You get it near a magnet, which these might be messed up now because I had it next to my iPad here, and magnet and the battery, whatever it is, could have messed it up. But I don't have a computer that's plugged into anyway. I've got 4 of them up here. You can protect them even because they've got these little tabs here. It's like an overwrite protect, and you lock it in place. So when you put it in there, it's a 3.5-inch floppy disk, and I think these have probably about 12 megabytes. You could fit maybe 10 songs from iTunes on here if you could get it to copy there and then play back for you. But that's how much it would hold. And that was a lot. That was a lot. I remember the even bigger ones that I used to plug in to my grandparents' old Commodore computer and play Space Taxi on, right? The little joystick clicking around. Yeah. Old technology, right? But this was the wave of the future. Then we had CDs, and I remember coming home, and my dad had a CD-ROM, is what they were called then. Now computers now, you don't even buy them unless you buy a desktop. You get a modern laptop, and a lot of times they don't even have a CD drive on there. You just download it off the internet. And I remember thinking, well, how do they put music on the CD? Because there's no tape in there. I didn't even really understand how a tape worked in the first place. Still don't. Don't understand really how you could listen to a CD because a laser goes around it. Okay, I mean, a record sort of makes a little sense with the little pin scratching it. I mean, I kind of comprehend that technology. But now, you don't even have to plug your phone into anything, and you just tap a few buttons, and you've got information just downloaded right to your device. I didn't think about it, but this is, I think this has got 32 or 64 gig, whatever it is, 64 gigs. I don't know the comparison of how many of these you could put in that, but it's a mountain of them. I mean, they probably stacked from the floor several times up of information. We've got information at our fingertips, don't we? It's gotten to the point where instead of family photographs of what you would run out of the house if it was on fire and grab, well, that's all online now. Got it all on Google Photos, or they're all on Facebook. And we don't even need to do that. And it's almost like, I mean, I've got hard drives, plural, full of pictures where you just save everything. And I don't even know what's there anymore because I don't have time to look through. Just got pictures and pictures and pictures. Thousands of these things of kids doing little things. And so it's like it's just lost in the information. I looked up the top keyword monthly searches on Google. The top 10, I think it was 3 of them were pornographic in nature. That's no surprise. Monthly, by the way. Over 400 million, just one keyword search. But they were all over 300 million times. The number 1 top keyword search in Google, not website visited. The number 1 top keyword search in Google was Facebook. I scratched my head and I told Aaron last night, I said, man, with 4 more strokes of the keyboard, you're actually at Facebook. It's just Facebook.com. Why are you doing a keyword search on Google for Facebook? Do you not know what it is? But every month, apparently, at least if the status continues, over 200 billion times, Facebook was searched for on Google. We've got the power of the internet at our fingertips. And what are we using it for? Well, look up porn and surf Facebook. That's what most people are doing. Working on an essay in class the other day, and a kid asked me how to spell a word. And I start to spell it, and I said, look it up. You've got literally the internet. You're typing on a Chromebook connected to the internet. Look it up. It's not even like I'm telling you to go to grab the giant Webster's Dictionary off the shelf and flip through 2,000 pages. And you got it. With the development of the internet came the possibility of a world of knowledge at your fingertips. We'll come back to that in a minute. Genesis chapter 10, we see the descendants of Noah. Shem being the oldest, the one that Abraham descended from, and ultimately Jesus. We've got Shem. Japheth was the middle, I believe. It doesn't matter which one for this anyway. And then Ham. Ham was the son that went in and found Noah naked and drunk on the floor and goes out and tells his brothers to laugh about it. Well, they go in backwards and put a towel over their dad's nakedness, and then Noah wakes up and finds out what Ham did and curses him and says, hey, you're going to be the servant of your brothers now. It's him right now that we're going to look at because he had a son named Cush and then had a son named Nimrod. If you'd like to have that name, Nimrod. But this was a mighty man, and some versions say that he was a giant, but I don't think it was a literal giant. I think it was that he was a powerful individual. Some commentators said that he was the world's first dictator. Most of the commentaries, though, kind of bash this scene in Genesis chapter 11, the Tower of Babel. And now, granted, there were some things going on here that was wrong. The pride that we're going to look at in just a minute. But really, when you look at this scenario here, we have Noah, and then Ham, Noah's son, and then Cush, and then Nimrod. We're talking 2 generations after the flood. 2 generations. Ham gets off the ark with all the animals and his brothers and his wife and his sister-in-laws and his mom and dad, and they start to populate the earth, and there's this population boom. And they all want to live in this one place. They're a big happy family. But we're not talking about hundreds, thousands of years of people living and dying and living and dying and living and dying. Living history. There was people literally on the ark at the time that they built the Tower of Babel. To me, that's kind of, when you realize that and you start looking, when you look at the movie, the Bible, it makes it seem like there was so much time that passes. And when you read this section here, it's a new chapter. Okay, well, there's new people here, and there's all these names in chapter 10, and people that you don't really know much about. And so, a lot of times we read this section here in chapter 11 as a Bible story in Bible class when we were kids, and we never really go back to it. There's some pretty important things that go on here. So let's look here at this scene here. In Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9. Now I'm going to read this. We're going to play a little game here. I'm going to read it. I'm going to ask a question. And I need you to stop and think what the answer is. And it's what you think. Okay? It's the best guess, educated guess, and inference, if you will, right? I'm going to make some good inferences today. Inferencing. Educated guess. Okay. It's not going to be a scary question, I promise. Now the whole world, the whole earth had one language and the same words. Stop. I forgot. I had it written down and I skipped it. When you go from Genesis chapter 9, they all get off the ark, and then 10, it talks about the different families and where they moved to, and they had their own little place in the world, and they, Canaan populated Canaan, and then Shem populates the Middle East. Anyway. The point is, there it talks about how they had their own language too. But it's kind of like reading Genesis 1 and then Genesis 2. Genesis 1 is an overview of the creation. Genesis 2 zooms in on day 6 of the creation of Adam and Eve. It's not that God created all things and then rested on the 7th day and then comes back after, maybe day 8 and creates Eve. It's a step back. and a zoom in on the scene. And so that's what we have going on here. It's not that everybody had one language when they got off the ark and then they made up something new and then they came back together in chapter 11. It's that here is an overview of Noah's family. Now we're going to go in chapter 11 and look at a specific scene here, where they still all lived together and how they dispersed. So we've got here of everybody living in the same place and having one language in verse 1. And then verse 2 is the people migrated from the east. They found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its tops in the heavens. And let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down and to see the city and the tower which the children of men had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of the earth. I mentioned a minute ago Nimrod, and we're told in chapter 10 that Nimrod was sort of the leader here in Babel, building this city. Now, we're told specifically here in verse 3 and 4 why they did it. Why they wanted to. They didn't want to be spread out. They wanted to make a name for themselves. Why a tower, though, do you think? What reason would they want to build a tower? I mean, why not something else? What purpose do you think they had in wanting to build this tower, aside from the two reasons given? Now, I read something that kind of struck my mind. Joe, do you have something? You look like you were...
They want to be famous.
They want to be famous? Okay. What just happened? I mean, relatively, short amount of time ago, what had just happened? The whole world was underwater. Hey, we don't want to get spread out. We like living together. We'll make a name for ourselves. We'll get famous. But do you imagine, now again, this is a guess here. It's not in the text. We're not told this is what was going in their mind, but can you imagine that, though? We still do the same thing today. Oh, the city flooded from a hurricane. Let's build a giant wall to keep it out. And then it floods again. We're not going to keep out the water. So maybe it's, hey, why don't we just build a big tower that we can climb up in case God decides to flood everything? You just think, how dumb if that was the reason. I mean, I say that, but like I said, we do the same thing. But they are literally living with the people that got off of the ark, that lived through the flood. The only reason that Noah and his family were there is because they obeyed God. They built the ark and they got in. Others could have been saved, but they chose not to. We're told that Noah preached while he was building the ark. But nobody else helped. Nobody else got in the boat. And so they think, well, maybe we can just build this tower. It's a good guess. The real reasons, though, that we're told, the specific reasons, was because they didn't want to get spread out, which is a totally bad reason. And they were prideful. Let's make a name for ourselves. Which, again, depending on the motivation, there's nothing wrong necessarily with being proud about things. It's being prideful is the problem. So what was the problem? No. Proverbs 25:27. It's not good to eat much honey, nor is it glorious to seek one's own glory. You ever met anybody like that? They all they can do is talk about the things that they've done, the great things that they've accomplished, the glory that they have gotten for themselves. I don't know the guy's name. I'm not even going to tell you the sport because it doesn't matter. But watching some of the Olympics and the interviews, there was an American athlete, and it kind of just turned me off to the whole thing. I mean, it was like the guy, all he could talk about was how great he was and all the things that he's done. And it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. He's going to do what he wants to do, and he's going to be successful because he's great. And now, I mean, I'm going to say that he won a bronze, which, I mean, that's nothing to stick your nose up at. I mean, he's still the best, third best in the world. But still, he looked like a clown bragging before you even win the gold medal. And then you don't win the gold medal. Well, I didn't like the guy after watching him. All he wanted to do was talk about how good he is. Well, you're not good enough, apparently, to win a gold. And so we think about this idea of eating too much honey. Can you imagine that physical scene there? Of someone just, almost like Pooh Bear. When you watch Winnie the Pooh, and it's like, man, they don't really show the aftermath of putting your hand in a honey jar. It just sort of looks like a little blue, but man, honey, it's everywhere. And someone, that's all they got, all over themselves. Like a baby eating spaghetti. That is not a pretty picture. Neither is looking out for your own glory, praising yourself. And so here we have this problem of the people, not even 2 generations or 3 generations past the flood, and they're already thinking, hey, look at us. Didn't really learn anything. Didn't really learn anything from the flood. What was the concern? I find verse 6 very enlightening. The Lord said, behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do. And here's the, scary part. And nothing, remember who's saying this. This isn't Moses writing this as commentary. This is in quotes still, that God is talking to God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, let us go down and see. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Really? The God of the universe is saying this? That anything that the man puts his mind to, they can accomplish? Whoa. I saw one, it was more of a news article, but it was kind of a commentary on this section here, that said that what would happen if God hadn't have dispersed them? Is it possible that they would have learned how to split the atom by the time Jesus came? I don't know. You consider the technology boom that we've had in the past 20 years, maybe it would have been possible. You think about what man accomplished in less than a decade, from 0 space travel to landing on the moon. And it's really easy to understand, yeah, God knows what he's talking about because he's God, but also just in our understanding of what we have done as a people, yeah, when we work together, we can do quite a bit. So God's concern was that they'll be unstoppable. They'll be able to do anything they want. You think about the inventions that we have created. And all of them, I can imagine, started from good intentions. I remember reading something about the invention of the TV and thinking, hey, people will be, you go to Disney World in the Carousel of Progress, right? And you sit there and hear the same song over and over and over again. But the little guy that's guiding you through this talks about, yeah, people will be learning how to speak foreign languages by watching their TV. I don't think that's ever happened. Nobody watches TV for education. The internet. What about the atom bomb? The bomb to end all wars, right? Now it just makes war scarier. Now it just makes global conflict the possibility of annihilating everyone. Didn't solve anything. Didn't fix anything. them building the tower, they still would have dispersed. They still would have been drowned by a flood if that was the case. God's wisdom is above man's wisdom. We talked about that last week, 1 Corinthians 1:18. God's ways are higher than our ways. Our wisdom is foolishness to Him. I don't know what we're doing. So the solution was, and I don't know, I mean, when you consider the scriptures of some of the things that God has done, I think He's funny. I think He's a funny God. I think there are things that He does because it's funny. It's an ends to His means, yes. But when you think about, let's go down, and they're confused their language. So they can't understand each other. Can you imagine that scene? People, they're all family members, and they're talking, and it'd be like having a middle of a conversation with somebody and that's grown up right next door to you, and all of a sudden he starts speaking Chinese. And you're not speaking the language that you grew up speaking either, you're speaking German. What a bizarre scene. What a crazy scene there of all of a sudden everybody's sitting there working together, building this great tower up to heaven, and now all of a sudden they can't speak the same language anymore. And so as a result, they were dispersed. Ultimately, that's what God told them to do in the first place. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Well, they were doing the first part, but they weren't doing the second. They were populating, but they weren't spreading out. They weren't doing their job. And so God's solution was to confuse them. I think that the consequence that God comes up with here is suitable for the crime. Punishment fits the crime. It's not like they were doing something that was just super evil here. Pride is certainly a problem, especially if this was a shot at God. Hey, you're not going to be able to punish us. Haha, your water can't reach us. But rather, He dispersed them. His will was done. He told them to do it, and they didn't do it, and so He's going to make them do it. And think about the problems that the language barrier has created over the course of history. Over the course of human history, where you say something in one language and it doesn't mean anything like that in another language. Even in American English and England English, there's things that they say there where it's just like, whoa, you can't say that here. It's a bad word. It's the same language, but it means something different. That language barrier it's prevented quite a bit. But now we've got this marvel that we've created that closes the language gap to almost nothing. The internet. Where we now live in this global neighborhood. If something bad happens in North Korea, everyone knows about it instantly, and something's got to be done right now. The language barrier for science is almost nothing anymore. If you can write in computer code, that's the language that you can speak with anybody else that knows that. The invention of internet, man once now has this common language. Let's turn very quickly to Daniel chapter 12. Verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Now, this is a tough passage here, and I don't want to make light of it, but I do want to point out that that word knowledge there is the same word. It's only used, it's less than 100 times in the whole Old Testament. One of those times is used in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So the idea here may be that, hey, everybody's running around, but it's nothing, they're not learning anything good. Kind of like in the days before the flood, where every intent and thought of man was evil continually. Amos chapter 8, verses 11 and 12. And this is a depressing verse here. But hopefully it's not depressing for us. Hopefully it doesn't apply to us. It's sad because it does apply to the world. Verse 11 and 12, Amos chapter 8. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will send a famine on the land. Not a famine of bread or a thirst for water, but of hearing the words of the Lord. They shall wander from sea to sea, and from north to east. They shall run to and fro to seek the word of the Lord, but yet they shall not find it. Why? They're not looking in the right place. My class read an article last week. It said, it was a Stanford University study, scientific study here, that said that 80% of 8th graders, they surveyed 8th grade or junior middle school to graduate students. I don't know what the numbers were for the other ones, but 8th grade students found that 80% of them can't tell the difference between a Slate article, like this is a fact, and one that is a sponsored article. They can't tell the difference between a commercial and reality. They can't tell the difference between what is actual fact and what somebody paid someone to say. 80%. Imagine being in a room, starving, literally starving, and having no idea how to pick up the wealth of food that's around you. I kind of thought, how can I put this? It's almost like having, an endless supply of canned goods and not having a can opener, but that doesn't really apply because we have the can opener. Maybe not knowing how to use the can opener. Maybe not knowing how to pick up the food and eat it. It's not that the food is undigestible. It's that we're not eating it. It's not that you can't understand this. It's that we either choose not to or don't even try. The Tower of Babel represented man's attempt to be prideful of what we can accomplish. It shows man's attempt to disregard God's instruction of what to do. And perhaps, as the idea of building a tower tall enough to get above the floodwaters, an attempt to avoid punishment. I mean, we can make all kinds of applications of man's attempt to live longer, to create AI so that we could always live forever and just sort of download your brain into a computer and now you got a robot body to walk. I don't know. But the possibilities here of what's going on, and we've created this new Tower of Babel, internet. But what is it doing for us? What are we accomplishing by ignoring what God has to say for us? Maybe it's because it's not digital in front of us, and yet we can read God's word from first word to last on the internet. But nobody's searching for that. I didn't look through, but you could see 1,000 of the top keyword searches. In the top 20, the Bible it was not in there at all. Nobody's searching for the Bible. Not even 500,000 people in that list that would have shown up search for any kind of keyword about the Bible. We're definitely living in a famine. We're living in a time where people are ignoring God's word, and rather we're building for ourselves these towers. What do you do about it? Pick up God's word. Devour it. Live it. We don't have the luxury of speaking to Shem, Ham, and Japheth. We don't have the luxury of speaking to Noah to know that, hey, the flood was real. We could read it in God's word, though. We know what to do. Are you choosing to do the right thing, though? If you're not part of God's kingdom, you can put him on a baptism. You can walk the way he wants you to walk. Won't you come as we stand and sing?